And so we also get to see Mags, and it seems like she's been a mentor for a long time, and it sounds like she's always been close with her tributes and her victors, because Haymitch says, then I remember games from when I was little, a hysterical boy dressed in a suit made of seashells who'd just been crowned in front of the entire nation of Panem. She tried to shield him from the cameras. She's always been there for her mentees, because she says, I'm so sorry about Luella Haymitch, and this is the first person. Haymitch says he, cries. He steps into her embrace and cries. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be brutal emotionally. I can feel it. And then Haymitch says, Luella is my one and only sweetheart. And I was like, okay, so that really places how much he cared for Katniss, because he was willing to use that nickname for her. Even if at first it was more of like a sneering type of thing. Later on, we do see him actually use it as a real term of endearment for Katniss. And so I think that shows how important she became to him, to the point that she felt like a family member the way Luella felt like a younger sister to him. Maysilee makes an interesting note that she actually doesn't like dressing exactly like Marilee. She's like, our mother likes to dress us like twins, not us. And then Haymitch realizes maybe that's why Maysilee wears so much jewelry, because it's the only way she can be herself, because she doesn't even have full control over her wardrobe. I really love the question that Mags asked her tributes. She said, at first when I started mentoring, I thought the only thing that you would want was to make it out alive, but as I've been a mentor over time and being a tribute myself, I've realized that there's more that people want than just to be alive. And she's like, I wanted to watch out for my tribute partner, but everybody sort of has their own thing, so what's yours? And I like that she doesn't underestimate what they want, even though they're from District 12. She talks to them like they're adults. Maysilee says that she doesn't want to plead for her life. She wants to go out with dignity. And Haymitch says that he wants to remind the Capitol that the only reason the tributes are there is because of the war. And the war has been over for a very long time, and hasn't 50 years been enough? And they're kind of talking a little bit about how to do this. And Haymitch is like, I'm not smart the way Wyrus is. Like, I can't outthink an arena. And Wyrus says, maybe you can. The arena's just a machine, a killing machine. And the kids kind of conclude that, even if you can outsmart it, the only way that the Capitol would have to air that footage is if you outsmarted the arena while also killing someone else or killing yourself in the process, which is super dark. First of all, I hate that there's someone named Panache. That's a horrible name. And of course he's from one. Panache is very much giving Cato from Hunger Games, and he comes up and he sucker punches Haymitch. And Haymitch thinks about fighting back, but there's peacekeepers. But at the same time, he's like, we outnumber them 4-1. And Plutarch even asks him, because he's recording all this, he's like, you could have turned on him. You had a knife. You could have fought against the peacekeepers. You could have fought against Panache. Like, why didn't you? And this is a question that really haunts Haymitch throughout the entire rest of the book, is when he has the opportunity to do something like that, why doesn't he do it? And Plutarch says, why do you agree to it? Why do I, for that matter? Why have people always agreed to it? And then he's like, well, it's something to think about. And that is one of the few things I like about Plutarch's character in the books, because I don't really like him as a person. But the way he's very willing to just pose these questions that cause people to think, I do like that about his character. I like when we're trying to make friends and create this anti-career pact. Haymitch is like, I can't let you talk to these people. You're gonna insult them. And Maysilee's like, I like her hair. Because he was like, you're just gonna insult her hair. And then Haymitch says, and Wyatt, don't be weird. Don't start spouting out the odds on their deaths. And then he says, can I do other people's deaths? No. So the District 3 boy who was trying to recruit Haymitch as an ally comes up, and his name is Ampert, and he's like, my father wants to meet you. His father's Beatty. And I was like, Beatty, what are you doing here? It was crazy. And it was also really sad because his dad is like having to watch his son train to go into the arena. And the horrible thing is that it's almost sad because Beatty's so smart. It's not even a question in his mind about why his son was reaped. It was punishment for him creating a plan that would sabotage the Capitol's communication system. And so the reason they can't kill him is because he is too valuable, like he's too smart. And so they just put his son in the Hunger Games as retaliation. And apparently Beatty was also Wyrus's mentor, because Haymitch says Wyrus said there would be clues about the arena in training. And Beatty says to listen to her. He's like, having been her mentor, I know how clever she is. And then he gets Beatty to confirm that the arena is just basically a killing machine and that machines can be broken. And Beatty does. And Beatty talks about basically destroying the battery. And then he also teaches Haymitch how to turn a potato into a light, which I liked. So we've got as many tributes as we're going to get for our anti-career alliance. And it's really interesting because it's like more than half the tributes. They're called the newcomers. Haymitch came up with this idea because his dad used to call people a netty newcomer if they were new to something. And so they've picked that as their like mascot name, I guess. It is terrifying. After we're done with training for the day, Haymitch gets pulled to go to what I thought was Snow's mansion, but it turns out to be Plutarch's house. And I was like, are we starting the rebellion already? Because that was one thing that was really weird about this book, was like seeing how long the rebellion has been in action. It wasn't like something that started a couple years before Katniss's games. Like, it's been in motion for 20 something years, maybe longer. It's really, I don't know if I liked it or not, because I do have my qualms about Plutarch, but he is talking about literature and poems and says something, and Haymitch kind of brings up the poem that Lenor's name is from. And Plutarch is just like, he's so delighted that Haymitch knows the poem. And then Plutarch doesn't bring it up at first, but President Snow is just sitting over here. We didn't notice him at first, I guess, but Snow is obviously very, very sick. And it's because he has just recently poisoned someone and he has to get the poison out of his body. And Snow says that milk will help because he just threw up all of the poisoned oysters that he ate. Plutarch tells Haymitch to go get milk out of the refrigerator, and then when Haymitch goes to get it, he drinks it all, like chugs a bunch of milk. I'm like, ew, but okay. So that there isn't any for President Snow to kind of like prolong this discomfort. It's basically the only thing he can do to President Snow. Snow even confirms, he's like, not an illness, food poisoning, a batch of bad oysters, but I've fared far better than Incitatus? Yep. Incitatus Lumi. And then Plutarch asks the parade master, and Snow says, was he? Just casually speaking in past tense about this guy. And then Plutarch goes to like get milk and bread and whatever it was that Snow wanted, and it just leaves Haymitch with Snow, which is eerie. And then Snow says all this stuff that makes Haymitch be like, why do you know so much about District 12? And I'm like, little do you know. And then he asks Haymitch for the pendant thing and is looking at it, and he's trying to figure out who Lenor Dove is. And he's like, there's really no point in lying about my girlfriend's name. Like, he's going to know everything. And so he says the girl's name is Lenor. And then he's like, Lenor what? Let me guess. And then he starts listing off colors. And Haymitch is like, how does he know about the Covey naming conventions? Haymitch says that it's Dove. And then President Snow is like, oh, I should have known. He's like, a color and a bird. We know how they feel about their birds. And I was like, can you imagine like not having the background we have from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and just hearing that? That is so creepy for him to know that type of stuff. And he knows even more than like just stuff you would know through a spy. Because he's like, she's delightful to look at, swishes around in bright colors and sings like a mockingjay. You love her, and oh, how she seems to love you. Except sometimes you wonder because her plans don't include you at all. And it's because he's had this experience with Lucy Gray. And it's because she talks all the time about the future, but doesn't really talk about Snow being in that future, really. And then the same thing happens with Lenor Dove, because she talks about being free and living like a covey again and traveling, but those plans never really include Haymitch. Snow guarantees that Haymitch is gonna die in the arena for his behavior, but he's like, however, how you die will be determined from your behavior this point forward, because you can have a horrible mutt-induced death or it can be quick, and it's specifically going to be depending on his behavior around the new Luella McCoy, because he has, at first, I kid you not, I thought he reanimated the corpse, and I was like, I know that they have probably the technology to do it, considering how they construct the mutts, but I was like, it's even creepier, I think, because they've brought in a body double and they've put fillers and stuff to make this girl, who already kind of looked like Luella, look exactly like her. And Haymitch notes that, you know, from far away, people who don't know her super well, people who have maybe only saw the reaping on TV, they're not going to be able to tell a difference. But she keeps saying the same things over and over again. She meets someone new and she's like, hello, my name is Luella, I'm from District 12. And Haymitch is like, she's going to knock him dead in the interview. But Mags is really smart and she figures it out, and she gives Luella like one of those platters with all the different breads from the different districts, and Luella immediately goes for the District 11 bread. And so Mags is like, are you from 11? And Luella just cries, and Mags is such like a mom figure to the tributes, because she just sits there and holds the girl while she's crying, and she's like, I'm sorry, like this happened to you. Haymitch is having a hard time calling her Luella though, so Maysilee proposes Lulu, and that kind of is how we create the separation between the girl who isn't there and then this body double. Beatty at their next training session is like, are you serious about breaking the arena? Like, do you actually want to do that? And apparently BD's been planning this. And I was like, that's crazy that we've already been trying to break an arena since the 50th and we don't successfully do it again until the 75th. But BD knows that his son's not coming back. Even like Snow's not gonna let him win. So he has been working with his son to develop a plan to drown the arena's like computer systems with this giant like water tank thing. And they need explosives to do this, and they're like smuggling all the stuff that they need in. And it's just really sad because Haymitch kind of offers to try to do it by himself, but BD knows that his son's not coming back, and his main request is like, just please make sure that it's not a horrible, slow, painful death for him. We figure out that Lulu has like an implant in her ear from the Capitol, and there's someone at all times telling her what to say and what to do. And so Mags kind of points that out, and it's very clear, like, let's not discuss any plans around this girl. And Haymitch likens it to the Jabberjay situation, where the Capitol had made those birds to listen to rebels and then take the information back to the Capitol. And Haymitch is like, we could probably use Lulu the way that we use the way the rebels used Jabberjays if we want to feed her incorrect information. I don't think we came back to that, but it was like an interesting note. One of the careers ruins, there's like these ceramic sunflower necklaces that District 9 has, and Haymitch was trying to talk District 9 into working with them, and he's like, Maysilee, you can't come because you're going to insult their jewelry. And she's like, why? Because it's gaudy, ugly. And Haymitch is like, yeah. But then it breaks, and Maysilee manages to put it back together, and she's very adamant. She's like, make sure they get you some glue because I don't know if this is going to stick. And I just like that she would take that on, even though Maysilee doesn't seem like a nice person. The entire time they're in training, she's helping people figure out their tokens. Like, she does this intricate braiding situation for one of the people who wanted to wear this necklace, and now she's fixing these necklaces, and she wants everybody to have something that's their own in the games. Like, that becomes very important to her. Haymitch has decided the way he's going to sell himself to the Capitol audience is as like a self-centered rascal. And it's funny because when he's trying to figure out what to do with Katniss, he cannot figure out a character for her, even though like for him it's so clear what he needs to do, because he is kind of part of this rebel plan. He's like, I need to make sure everyone thinks I'm only out for myself, despite the fact that he's in this alliance. And he tells his alliance separately, he's like, hey, I'm going to be playing this role, but I want to be there for you guys. Basically, we talk to the game makers, and then we get our score, and he says Lulu pulls a 3 and me, I get a 1. Probably because he's done too much at this point, between running with Luella's body and spitting on one of the Capitol guys, even though the Capitol audience ate it up. And then when he was talking to the game makers, he basically was like, y'all are gonna murder us. So and they did not like that. Later, Haymitch is talking about the Mockingjay pin with Maysilee, and he's like, you know, if you don't like it, I'm sure Lenore Dove can take it off your hands. And she's like, oh, your girlfriend doesn't like me. And Haymitch is like, maybe because you're so mean. And Maysilee's like, sure, but also because I know her secret. And I was like, spill the beans, because we're gonna get into this arena. And I was like, I know what happens to Maysilee. I was like, if we don't get to hear about this, I'm gonna be very upset. She's talking about the orange paint that was on Lenore Dove's fingernails when she came up to play music for the mayor's birthday party. And she's like, you ask her about that when you get home. And I'm like, trying to draw any connection possible. Then my brain was just, I was like, orange paint, where have we heard this? We hadn't heard anything yet, but I was trying so hard to pull connections that were not there. I really like how some of the ideas were kind of replayed here. So Haymitch is talking about going to do the interviews, and he's like, anything that makes you stand out is a plus. Make me remember you. So who are you? And that was very much what he was echoing to Katniss and Peeta, because that's why the old tributes mentor the new ones, because they know all these little things that other people would maybe not think of. It's really sad, but it was stuff like that where I was like, oh, he learned this here and then tried to give that advice to Katniss and Peeta. Of course, their stylist doesn't show up, and so their prep team is freaking out. And it's so funny because one of the girls, Proserpina, is like calling her sister, and she's like, I'm gonna fail the university test. And then like 10 minutes later, the older sister of Proserpina comes in, and it's Effie Trinket. And I just love it. You hear the heels on the floor, and who's ready for a big, big, big day? And I was like, ah! Effie. I wanted to see her in this book. Here's the thing. I wanted to see her in this book because I do like her character, but I also I loved that they had a little bit of like a romantic angle at the end of the movies. Now I understand why that's not the case in the books at all, but I wanted to see Effie in these books because I just wanted to see like younger versions of her and Haymitch interacting. But it's clear, Haymitch even says, well, she swallowed the capital propaganda hook because she's like, we can't let these tributes go out looking horrible. She says, this is our chance. No, it is our duty to honor them. And she's talking about the people who died during the dark days. And then, of course, like last minute, their stylist shows up and he has a giant snake. And he's like, I'm here to dress my tributes. And weirdly enough, Lulu walks forward and she's like, I will take the snake. And she wears this giant snake for her interview. He says that it gives Lulu a sense of power and she walks by tributes 3 times her size, brandishing the snake and hissing, which I'm reading this as Lulu is doing the hissing, which I kind of thought was funny. Even though like every time we do see her, I'm like still a little creeped out because she is supposed to be another person. I love how they bring Caesar in. Caesar descends from the ceiling perched on a crescent moon, stars shooting behind him. At this point, he's pretty young, so it's interesting to see. He still does the same thing. He has the same suit apparently every year for like 20, 30 years, but this time it is a forest green lips and hair. And they do acknowledge the 10th Hunger Games, so they don't really show anything from it, but Caesar is talking about how after the 10th Hunger Games, that was when, they introduced betting and the sponsors and dropping like the parachutes and stuff like that, and how that's how the games went from a punishment to entertainment. So the Capitol audience knows that's when the change happened, but it's just weird that they don't want to know more about it. Like the whole reason that happened was because of snow. We do get a little thing, a relic of a woman named Gull who was credited with coining the phrase, may the odds be ever in your favor for the anniversary. Creepy. So what's interesting in this games, I feel like, is the fact that the Capitol, even though they're closest with the career districts, they actually don't like the career tributes. Panache comes out and he's like, I'm the biggest, the beefiest, and the best. And he hits a pose and Caesar says, my word, it sounds like we should barbecue you. And Haymitch makes a note that the people in the Capitol don't actually like the careers from 1, 2, and 4 because they're kind of seen as Capitol wannabes. Like these people, they'll do anything to get to the Capitol, but no one's ever going to accept them. And I think that really echoes the sentiment that we see in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because Sejanus's family does manage to buy their way into the Capitol, but no one really accepts Sejanus as their own. Snow is actually the only person who's even nice to Sejanus. Haymitch does his whole thing about being on his own or whatever, but most of the other tributes who are in the anti-career pack, they are showing their skills, like they're talking about them, but they're mostly talking about it in context as to how they're going to help their other anti-career tributes. Haymitch even says, maybe we'll lose, but we're sure making a lot of people proud back home. So there is a sense of like district unity happening here, which I think is like an undercurrent to what we see later in the rebellion. Lulu sort of malfunctions on stage. She starts saying, you'll murder us, and she has the snake, and it's very disturbing to the Capitol people, obviously. And then Haymitch, when he's on stage, he thinks about Woodbine Chance, the guy who was supposed to come to the Hunger Games, and during his interview, he's like, I'm trying to channel that kid, and that's when he says, I don't see that it makes much of a difference, meaning the fact that there's double the tributes. They'll still be 100% as stupid as usual. I figure the odds will be roughly the same. So that I feel like that was kind of like an iconic line that Katniss picked up on when she was watching Haymitch's games. But to hear the actual context of it, and that's really not at all who Haymitch is interesting. And they're asking about him getting a 1, and Haymitch says, basically was like, it wasn't easy to get a 1. I mean, I have 31 sworn allies, this rock hard body, and a brain 5 times smarter than the careers. And he's like, but what I really have is guts because I pissed off the game makers. And he basically says, like, I know people out in the crowd know just what I mean, because he's trying to endear himself to them. And then Haymitch kind of goes off the rails, and I was like, Haymitch, please reel it back in, because he's talking about how he makes alcohol in the district and how he sells it to the head peacekeeper. And I was like, you basically just ratted someone out for, I don't know if it's treason necessarily, but I was like, you basically just killed the head peacekeeper in your district. Snow is going to be pissed. Plutarch manages to get Lenore Dove on the phone with Haymitch. She's been arrested for singing some of the like rebellion songs. She's like, people needed it. They needed some way to gather together and do something that meant something to them. And then she we find out later, she basically lied that she was going home in the morning. She was not. Haymitch asks, why did you let me talk to her? And Plutarch is like, because I need you to trust me about this whole plan about breaking down the arena. And basically tells Haymitch, like, the way that you get under the arena to mess with, like, flood the brain as they were trying to do, is that you need to get in through where the mutts are entering and leaving the arena. And of course, Haymitch kind of questions why Plutarch would be doing this. He's like, you have everything you could possibly want here. Plutarch says you should know that despite appearances, a desire for freedom is not limited to the districts, but Haymitch is like, what do you not have? Like, what do you not have freedom to do here? He doesn't really get an answer to it, but he does understand that even the people in the capital are kind of under the thumb of Snow. We're talking about how to frame the career tributes because we want to play on this idea. We talked about it earlier, but Plutarch really confirms that they hate how the district people are trying to be more capital than the capital people are. And it's this weird dynamic. And they're like, if we want people on your side, we really need to frame the careers as these like desperate wannabes. And they're trying to come up with a name that kind of means like fake. And so Haymitch kind of comes up with the idea of a near beer career, which is like a fake beer in District 12. And this gives Plutarch something to work with to kind of like stitch in together with the propos. At least Plutarch knows that he's not good because he's talking to Haymitch, and Haymitch is saying like, thank you for your help, because he's like, I really do want Plutarch on my side at this point. Like, that's an important place to be. He says, well, I'm despicable on many levels, but in this, I'm on your side. So at least like he's aware that he's not a good person. Haymitch goes into the games, and I think it kind of rubs Maysilee the wrong way, but he's like, look, I got a 1. People are going to be gunning for me. The game makers hate me. Genuinely being around me is a hazard. And so he says that he doesn't want any allies, even though he's part of this bigger alliance. Haymitch, before they're going into the arena, he keeps dreaming about Lenor Dove, and he says her name song's hitting way too close to home. In it, a guy loses the love of his life, Lenor, and he's going crazy for missing her. It's the Edgar Allan Poe poem, where it's like, quoth the raven nevermore. I really liked how that was worked in here. I'm sorry, it is disgusting that they reuse the trackers. So they're putting the trackers in their arms. Wyatt says, like, what happens if we win? Do you take it out? And the lady says, we collect all of them from the tributes, dead or alive. They're reusable. Ew. We get the confirmation that, so like we figured that Lulu was from District 12, but the other tributes didn't know that. And so Lulu ends up singing a song that all the kids sing in District 11, and one of the 11 tributes picks up on it, and then she like tests it and starts singing another song, and then Lulu finishes the song, and she was like, what the heck, why is your tribute from 11? And Haymitch has to explain that she's just a body double. However, they do have a group hug before they go into the arena, which I thought was very sweet. And Haymitch initiated it. So I just felt horrible for them going into it, because they're not exactly friends at this point, the 4 of them. Like Lulu's not really all the way there, and Maysilee is a little antagonistic at times, and Wyatt we have our suspicions and back history about. But at that point, like, they really do hold on to each other, and Mags let them know, she's like, when you're going through training in the arena, you're going to naturally gravitate towards one another, so kind of lean into that. Effie comes to see Haymitch off, and it's really upsetting and sad. Haymitch asks Effie, when they get my body, can you give the necklace to my girl back home? And Effie's like, I will try my absolute best. And then she's like, and keep a positive attitude. I was like, oh, Effie. So this is obviously exactly as Katniss describes it when she's watching Haymitch's Hunger Games. They raise up on the plates, and the arena is so beautiful that most people get really distracted. And Haymitch manages to get off his platform and get a spear and a backpack before most of the other people have realized what's going on. He managed to get back to himself, but everyone else is still kind of dazed and looking around, including the career tributes. 20 tributes died the first day, in the bloodbath, which is insane. He even says in a usual game, only 4 tributes would be left. But this year, 28 people are left, which is just crazy. There was full water jugs in Haymitch's pack, and I understand that he didn't want to use it right away, but when he I didn't even clock it at first. He bends down to get a drink from one of the streams or whatever with a bunny, because there's bunnies everywhere. And then the bunny dies, and he was like, oh no? And then he's like, that's what the charcoal pills are for, because he found charcoal pills in his pack. And it seems like in all of the packs, there's anti-poison medicine, because we figure out pretty quickly every single thing in the arena is poison. And unless it came directly from the cornucopia, you cannot eat it. It's horrible watching him try to work the poison out of his body. I was like, this is genuinely terrible. Wyatt is the first tribute from District 12 to die, and Haymitch realizes how hard it hits, even though he didn't actually even want him as an ally. So after he got poisoned, he basically fell into a bunch of bushes and fell asleep and thought he'd hit himself well, but he did not. And then he hears find Haymitch, and then Lulu pokes her face in between the bushes and is like, found him. And I was like, what? And he was like, why are you looking for me? And she points to her ear. The game makers were trying to get her to go find him, probably to make his life a little bit harder, or to get the District 12 crowd turned against him if he ended up killing Lulu. But this doesn't really sway Haymitch from his main purpose at this point, which is finding one of the berms, like the hill things, I guess, and that's where the mutts will come in and out of. Haymitch has made a fire, and again, this is one of those things where I'm like, I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I feel like it was, because Haymitch says, fire is catching, she'd say, talking about Hattie. But if this one burns down the arena, I say good riddance. And I was like, well, fire is catching, but not for another 25 years, sorry. It's horrible. He really did try his best to take care of Lulu, but she ends up breathing in, I guess, poison air from the flowers. She starts dying, but it's going in kind of a slow process, and Haymitch starts yelling at the game makers, like breaking the fourth wall here, and he's saying enough because he knows she has that pump with the medicine in it. That's like how they're able to keep her sedated and kind of out of it enough that she isn't really able to say who she actually is because she's playing this body double. And so he's like, they could send a lethal dose of it, kind of mercy kill her, and they won't do it. And so he has to do it himself, and he screams, enough, she is not your plaything, and manages to find the pump. And I was like, that is, it's so horrible. And it's moments like these when I remember that they're making this into a movie, and I'm gonna be really upset when this happens. And then, just to kind of top it all off, Haymitch leans down because he knows that the earpiece is still working, and he says, you did this to her, this is who you are, to the game makers. I was like, they're not gonna like that at all. He runs into some butterflies. The butterflies are tasers. So that's fun. He manages to use wild gas flowers, and he is able to use, I guess, he's able to set a fire and use the gas flowers to take the butterflies out. And I was like, this is such a weird arena compared to what we're used to. Luckily, he follows the butterflies. He's trying to like hide what he's doing because obviously he doesn't want the Capitol to know he's looking for the doors where the mutts come out. And so he manages to find where the butterflies are coming in, and he like wedges a stick in there, but like really pretends not to see it. I really like his mentors sent him like grape juice and like a really nice goblet and stuff. And he's playing it up for the crowd, obviously. And he like cheerses them, and he's like, to my fellow rascals in the Capitol. And I was like, I kind of love that he's playing that angle. And again, like he's trying so hard to think about what people are thinking when they're watching, because he finds Ampert. He's like, I need to get to him because like they're working together on the explosive thing, but the crowd can't know that. And so while he's on his way over, he's like, okay, what do I need from Ampert that would like justify me going and finding him after I left my entire alliance? And he's like, oh, I need information. And that actually is true, because he kind of needs to know, he knows who is dead, but he doesn't know how. Like he doesn't know what everyone else in the arena can do as far as like their skill level, basically. And so they exchange information and food and stuff like that and start prepping for the next day when they're gonna try and blow up the water tank, because Ampert kind of like clocks it immediately. He sees the stick in the thing. He's like, okay, that's our way in to like sub-level A or whatever it is, where all of the computery and underground parts of the arena are kept. And so they're doing it. Ampert manages to get everything ready, and then Haymitch is going down. He gets under the door and is like using the rungs to get down, and he puts the explosive on the water thing. And then he's like, this wave might take me out, but he's not just gonna lay down and die. So he fights his way up to the top ladder. He sees Ampert's face, and then a bunch of rainbow bats attack, which makes it really hard for him to get out of sub-level A. He almost gets taken out by the water because the explosion does work. For a second, he was like, it didn't go off. And then like right after that, it's like, and then he gets thrown about by the water. He gets out. The bats have disappeared. I feel like I'm giving a play-by-play on ESPN. And then he sees the squirrels. And I was like, I feel like I remember there being something creepy about the squirrels, because I don't fully remember exactly everything Katniss saw. It doesn't take Haymitch long to realize that they're programmed for Ampert. Like some of the mutts are made specifically to take out certain tributes, which is sickening. And Haymitch tries his best, and he's trying to get to Ampert, and finally they leave, which it's like, okay, they killed him, but then by the time they all clear away, Haymitch is like, all that's left is the bones. Like they completely devoured Ampert, and he feels so bad because he knows, first of all, Beatty watched that, and then also he had promised. I thought he was going to stab Ampert. I thought that was going to be like the way he got him out of it quicker, was like a mercy kill, but he couldn't get to him, and like that didn't happen, which it was horrible. And then there was another line where he's like, and his coffin will hold only these pearly white bones, which just is such I feel like maybe it's just like an earworm, like stuff that I have from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, when Lucy Gray is like talking about her mother, talking about her being like, I think in District 12, and she's like, only her bones, only her pearly white bones. And that was kind of like a phrase reused here. And maybe that's a District 12 phrase, but it does kind of call back to the other characters, and like maybe that's something he picked up from Lenore Dove because Lenore got it from Lucy, you know, like how sometimes families will kind of say similar phrases. Immediately after, there's an earthquake, and Haymitch is like, you missed, like yelling at the game makers. I was like, Haymitch, please stop doing this to yourself, like it's only going to get worse. This is when the volcano erupts. Also, while that's happening, the entire sky starts glitching, and Haymitch is like, we did it, like we messed up the computer system. And unfortunately, it recovers pretty quickly. And it's really sad because like for a split second, he's looking at the stars and he's like, these are the same stars that my brother sees, like this is the actual sky. But then it flickers right back and he's back in the arena. It's like all this effort, and for what? Just to show that it can be done. But the thing is, like, obviously the Capitol's not going to air it. The only people who are going to know are the people who do the games. And maybe they didn't even see, I assume they saw Haymitch going down there. How could they not? They see everything. But this makes Haymitch feel like he has failed because the games are going to continue. And I feel like at this point, Haymitch is kind of trying to figure out what he wants to do with the rest of his life, because Snow has essentially guaranteed he's not getting out. So he's like, what good can I still do while I'm in here? And he remembers what Mag said about wanting to protect her district partner. He's like, that's it. I'll go and find Maysilee. I'll make sure that she's the one who gets out, and then she can be her rebellious self and set that precedent for other people. And that's the plan. Then he kind of has like a secondary thought where he's like, the generator. Maybe I can instead find the generator, take it down, and that would also take down the arena. He's like, I could hack the generator to death with this axe and dagger that I have. And he thinks that the generator is going to be on the other side of this, basically the maze from Harry Potter. Where it's like all these holly bushes, but they're like walls basically. And he's trying to get through it, and he gets super lost until he finds a bunny. Bunnies were the hero today. And so he's following one, and then as soon as he comes out, a sword blade swishes through the air right next to him. He's like, oh, I forgot. There's also careers in here. I was like, oh yeah, the other tributes. Maybe that was important. So he takes out two of the careers, and then Panache is about to kill him. And Haymitch, all he has is talking his way out of there at that point. And so he's like, Panache, remember, you don't want to look stupid. Don't look stupid, because that was what Caesar was joking about with him earlier. And that kind of like catches him off guard long enough, because he's like, why are you saying that? Like, what am I about to do that's going to look bad? And in that amount of time, that gives Maysilee enough time to poison dart him and save his life. Now we're teamed up with Maysilee, and I love this. Maysilee cleans the wounds and closes them with neat, even stitches. I'm not surprised, really, after watching her create those artful tokens out of spit and string. I was like, Maysilee is a crafter, an artsy gal, and I was like, of course that would help in the arena. It's a little reminiscent of PETA, because like he paints his way into camouflage. I love that she managed to make a fork out of a piece of, I think, wire or something, because it was such a joke earlier that she wanted silverware to eat everything, even a sandwich, because she's civilized. And Haymitch is like, oh, sorry, no silverware. And she's like, don't worry, I got us covered. And I like that Haymitch is talking about, like, you know, if it's the last two of them left, he says something like it kind of a joke about Maysilee darting him. And then he says a little more seriously, he's like, I think you couldn't. And to Maysilee, that is a compliment, because she's like, thanks for that. I don't think you could either. Because they're kind of acknowledging the humanity in each other, even though they have been at odds for a significant portion of their pre-games situation. And then he's trying to go to sleep and he can't. Something's kind of nagging at him, and it was actually very sweet. He's like, remember what Ampert said? And it was about them being like family, I guess. And she's like, sure, I'll be your sister. And then he says, night, sis, and rolls over and falls asleep. And I was like, this is going to be really upsetting in about 10 pages. Maysilee is super smart, though, and she knows Haymitch is trying to accomplish something that he won't tell her. He's on some sort of mission, and Haymitch is like kind of in a rush, and she's like, what's the rush? Because she wants to be in on the plan. She wants to know what the secret is, and now she's using it against him. And all he can really say is like, we should not go back to the cornucopia. We should just keep going north. And he can't tell her why, because that's where he thinks the generator is. But if he was going to say that out loud, they'd probably just like immediately release a mutt and kill him. So apparently, like, I think on Twitter or something, the marketing team was releasing little like symbols or something. I didn't see this, but somebody said that there were a bunch of ladybugs, and as soon as this popped up, I was like, oh. We go back into the like walls of holly bushes, and Maysilee doesn't really want to go in there, but they decide they're going to cut their way through, like make a straight path through it so that they don't get lost. And the second they try to like knock it down, all of the holly berries turn into ladybugs, but like leech ladybugs that try to suck the blood out of you, like kind of like a tick, but scarier. Maysilee is like, I guess the game makers don't want us going through that hedge. So they've lost enough blood that it's like, let's not try that again right away. I did highlight when Haymitch is like, I ditch my pack in a patch of Katniss, and we take off toward the disturbance. So like, you have to highlight it at this point if it says Katniss anywhere. They find a porcupine, but like a bear-sized porcupine, and they try to save Hull. He's the one who's gotten stabbed by the porcupine, and it doesn't really work. Like, even if they give him the antidote, it's just kind of not enough at that point. And Maysilee, she does have like a rebellious spirit to her, because she's like, one of us has to be the worst victor in history. Tear up their scripts, tear down their celebrations, set fire to the victor's village, refuse to play their game. And then to Haymitch, that reminds him of his own father. And he's like, make sure they don't use our blood to paint their posters. And she's like, exactly. And so they're very much on the same page about whoever wins needs to be like this type of person that does not go along with what the Capitol wants. So now between the two of them, they're trying to create posters, basically pictures in the games showing people that the games are wrong. And so when they wake up the next morning and they set up for breakfast, they set it up like a really civilized picnic with their, like their glass flute and their silverware and napkins and stuff. And Haymitch says, this morning's poster says, we're civilized, we appreciate beautiful things, we're as good as you. To kind of like show the Capitol that there's not that big of a difference between district and Capitol people. This was insane. When they find game makers in the arena, I was like, does this happen normally? Like, is this an average experience? So they come across, it's two of the careers, and then Maysilee and Haymitch, they run into 3 game makers who are there cleaning. Like, they're trying to fix the arena after all the stuff Haymitch and Ampert did. And then Marie, one of the careers, and Maysilee both take out 2 of the game makers, and the third one, I think she like falls down into sub A and dies. So like, they've taken out 3 game makers because the game makers say you're in violation of the rules, and Maysilee's like, that'd be a lot more impressive if you weren't shaking like a leaf right now. Because what are they gonna do? Like, they're already in the Hunger Games. And so Maysilee just, I feel like she has a lot more grit than was expected. And then a bunch of like tear gas bombs get dropped to drive everyone away from the scene, because they're like, enough of this. They're already not going to be showing it on TV. And so they run away, and this kind of haunts Haymitch again, because he kind of hears Plutarch's voice being like, why didn't you kill them? You could have, you had the opportunity. And Haymitch has a hard time like figuring out his own answer to that. And Haymitch is like, it's not like I'm not a killer, because he just killed those 2 other people. So he can't come back from that. And so he's like, what was stopping me? Am I just brainwashed? Like, what is it? And Maysilee even gets onto him for it. She's like, Haymitch, it's time you grow a backbone. Like, what the heck? Why didn't you back me up in there? A career had to back me up. And Haymitch says, hello again, meanest girl in town. It only hurts because it's true. Maysilee's grandmother used to say something that made her feel better. She says, nothing they can take from you was ever worth keeping. And then Haymitch says, I know that song because Lenor Dove sings it all the time. This is when they kind of like retry to do their tunnel, and it actually works this time. And then we get to the end, and Haymitch is like, the generator's not just sitting here for me to hack away at it. There's like a super long drop with spiky rocks at the bottom, and that's where the generator is. And he doesn't know exactly what to do about it, but he tells Maysilee, I'm not going back. Like, I'm staying here at the edge. Like, there has to be something here for us to find. And Maysilee's like, well, there's not that many of us left anyway. I don't want it to be us too. And so she heads on her own way. And they really have a hard time leaving one another, because they are friends. They're basically family now. This is when Haymitch drops a pebble down to see like how far away the actual bottom of that pit is. And it takes a really long time. He's like, not making that. But then it bounces back up. So there's like a force field over the generator. But at the same time, he's like, I'm not supposed to know that that's there. This is when Maysilee gets stabbed through by those like mutt flamingos, and that's really sad. And when she's dying, she kind of like pinky promises Haymitch, and he understands like what that means, to do his best to bring the Capitol down, even though like he doesn't know how to do it, and he just feels like he's up against such a big force that there's nothing he can actually do. But Haymitch makes it a point to not leave. Like, I feel like it's weirdly enough courtesy or tradition or whatever it is to like kind of leave the tribute so they can get clawed up by themselves. But Haymitch is like, no, I want the the audience to see me in the background upset about her being dead. And so he stays while they take her body away. Haymitch also notes that he has his own jewelry collection now. The District 9 Sunflower, Wyatt's script coin, and Lenor Dove's Warring Songbird and Snake. And now Maysilee's like blow dart necklace. And he's like, why, I'm almost as decorated as Miss Donner herself, which was like a nice little tribute. And he even kind of like thinks over their relationship. And he's like, how did we go from battling to being friends? And he's like, oh, it's kind of like a sibling relationship for them, where they fight for each other, but they fight with each other. And that's kind of how he views their situation in his mind. Right then is when he gets a parachute, and it's ice cream. He's like, why did I get this? Like, something's nagging at the back of my brain. And it was basically like Mag sending him a pick-me-up, because earlier Maysilee had said, I'll try and keep that in mind in the arena, more ice cream, because she was being sarcastic about some things that Proserpina said. And he even says, Max and I tried not to laugh because Proserpina wasn't born evil. She just had a lot of unlearning to do, because she was being insensitive, but she didn't even really know that she was being insensitive. Then he decides that now he's going to go and protect Welly, who was from District 7. And he's like, she would make a great victor, and she would carry on this rebellious spirit, because he really doesn't think he's going to be allowed to leave alive. And the only other person between the two of them is a District 1. It's so sad, the state that he finds her. She's like almost starved to death. She can't even call out for him. She just has like a bike bell that she uses to signal him, and he goes and helps her, and he's trying to even get her to keep water down. He makes a potato lamp. And then it's just like, it's such a sad moment. Silka, who is like one of the last District 1 tribute, she comes and sits at the base of their tree, and he can hear her crying. He was like, I didn't take her for a crier, but they got some chocolate as like a gift from a donor. And so he drops a couple chocolates down to her and can hear her eating them. And it's like, it's a really sad moment, but Haymitch hopes that the Capitol sees this, because he's like, this is another poster moment that people need to see, a sort of team mentality among the districts, even though they're technically placed against each other in the Hunger Games. Haymitch realizes that there's actually more explosives in Maysilee's necklace, and he remembers BT was trying to tell him something. He's like, we have more explosives in, and then they got cut off or whatever. And so now he's like, I'm gonna go blow a hole in the cornucopia. I love how we just decide different plans this whole time. He knows that he needs to hide Welly to do that, because she's really not strong enough to defend herself or even walk around with him. Welly is really just terrified. She doesn't want Haymitch to leave, and also Haymitch is trying to explain, like, hey, Maysilee said that you would be a great victor, and that you would still be a newcomer even if you won. Like, you would never stop being a newcomer, which is sort of like shorthand for them, I guess, of a kind of more rebellious vibe. We get a picture from one of the parachutes, and on the top it says, courtesy of the Capitol, which is like a callback to the shorts that he had in the beginning of the book. And the thing is, it's a picture of milk, and he's like, it's the exact replica of a picture from Plutarch's library. Remember, he drank all that milk so that Snow couldn't have it and would have to keep suffering. And he's like, dang it. He's in this sort of like, he can't explain to the cameras what he's doing. So if he doesn't give the milk to Welly, it looks like he's either trying to kill her or is like not on her side. But since it's from the Capitol, it very well could be from Snow, which would mean that it's probably poisoned. And Haymitch is like, I could drink it, and if it is poisoned, he'll die. But if it's not poisoned, again, he'll look like he wasn't taking care of Welly. And so it's just like this really horrible situation. He's like, should I pretend to trip and drop all of it? And he's like about to drink the milk. He's like, game over for me. Which at this point would kind of mean leaving Welly on her own, which wouldn't work anyway. But then he hears the cannon and runs over and finds that Silka has killed Welly. And not just killed her. She sliced her head off. Terrifying and disgusting. And Silka has clearly lost her mind. And didn't we say something a little while back where we were talking about the rabbits, and Haymitch is like, yeah, you could probably eat them, but just like they might have mad rabbit disease or something like that. Like it would mess up your thought processes. And I'm guessing that's what had to have happened here. And Haymitch even is like, what do you think the other people in your district are going to think about this? Like, even if you come home a victor, like this action is what's going to alienate you from everyone else. She's like, I'll tell you how it is when I get home. And then Haymitch is like, you're not going home. And he's like, there will be no victor in this games. And I was like, this is very much giving Katniss. Haymitch tries to disappear into that hedge like path that he and Maysilee made and runs to the edge where there's that drop off. And he's like, no way is Silka following me. And he's also got like a really bad cut across his stomach. In return, he has gouged out one of her eyeballs. I forgot how gross the end of this is. He's literally holding his intestines inside of his body. And then she comes after him, raises an axe and throws it and misses. And so we all know that this is when it goes over the edge. And Silka's like, you know what I missed, but I'm going to make it longer than this guy, because she's just got her eye and he is about to, like, all of his guts are spilling out onto the floor. So, but then Haymitch remembers, like, I just need to wait until the axe reaches the bottom and pops back up. And that's what happens. And he's like, this is what the love of my life would call poetic justice. He has just like kind of a slight mental break where he's like, pay attention, Panem, newcomers land on top, which is an obvious play on snow lands on top. And then you can hear the game makers over the intercom system being like, Haymitch, stop all activity immediately, like, don't do this, because they see that he's about to throw an explosive over at the generator, and he does it. And truly, I would believe that he was dead after this scene if we didn't know. The description of his intestines in his hands is so disgusting. I could not. I don't want to see that part in the movie. I hope this is like, I know we all joke about the blood poisoning in the first movie, how it's non-existent. I really hope that this insides falling out of his stomach thing is also, let's just not, maybe. Haymitch, because he's having to recover, he's kept in this really weird twilight state. And I was like, is this part of why his nightmares are so bad? Because he's having these really intense hallucinations. And I think Snow's having him tortured because while he's kind of in this like drugged state, he's also seeing clips from different Hunger Games. So it's like, on top of all the horrors he's just lived, he's having to watch so many other terrible things all in rapid succession. He says, I'm fed clips from old Hunger Games curated especially for me. Gory snippets, terrorize children, despair. And then he says that he sees Lucy Gray. The television glows on screen. A girl in a rainbow of ruffles sings a familiar tune with unfamiliar words. And it's showing Lucy Gray's interview with Caesar, and that she waves to someone off stage who he does end up figuring out is President Snow. And it's at this time that Haymitch realizes that Lenor Dove knows about Lucy Gray. Whoever, her family must have passed it along, and he's like, is that why she keeps these little bits of color that I'm seeing on Lucy Gray right now in her own wardrobe and stuff like that, kind of carrying on the memory of her, but it's too painful to share even with me. Effie Trinket comes back and gets him ready for like the victory tour or something, and Haymitch is like, Magno's not coming, I'll tell everyone that you dressed me. And Effie's like, please don't. But Effie really does stand up for him, because the guards are kind of like pushing him around. Like, everyone knows that Haymitch did something bad, according to the Capitol. And she's like, he's the second quarter called Victor. Someone should be with him to honor this achievement. And even the Peacekeeper is like, your funeral. And I'm wondering, is that why she gets assigned to District 12? Because she does note that it's the worst possible assignment for her to have gotten. And she's trying to help him out, and Haymitch is touched, and he says, thank you. And then Effie says, but they really are for greater good, the Hunger Games. And Haymitch is like, and now she's lost me. Apparently, Wyrus and Mags were both tortured for what Haymitch did, and this is when we see them in the state that we see them at the 75th, because Mags is in a wheelchair, and he says, distressed Wyrus twitches her head about in a bird-like fashion, a steady stream of words spouting from her lips. So that's very much the Wyrus that we know with Katniss. And then he's watching back his own Hunger Games, and this is when he's really like, this isn't what happened. Like, the way they stitched it together is convincing and tells a good story, but it's not the right story, even though they're using all of these true-to-life clips. Connections misleading. It's less flat-out lying than lying by omission. And then he shows, like, here's the clip they're showing, but they're showing it out of order. They're intersplicing different tributes, so it looks like something different happened. And in this rendition, I'm not even attempting to protect any of my allies. Day 3, the squirrels, as if making a second appearance, swarm Ampert. I'm nowhere to be found. So they're like cutting it up so it looks like a different thing. And now, my fellow fans of The Bachelor, you know this very well, because this is like the exact technique they use in The Bachelor. When they're making, especially like the promos for preseason, they genuinely try and like intersplice things to throw you off. And now we all know, if you hear someone saying something but you don't see their mouth saying it, they're putting it with a different person and they're messing up the clips to throw you off the scent of who wins The Bachelor. But this is a much deeper and more upsetting version of that happening, but it's like, it's crazy. And yeah, every single thing they do, he's like so confused. Did they show the audience a different sky or none at all? Or did they intentionally save Marit's death to increase tension at the end to like improve the storyline? The game makers must have been scrambling like crazy to control the narrative by this point. I hope those in the districts can still see it as the piece of propaganda it is. but no telling what they've been fed, which is like also kind of weird to think about, because what they're showing the people in the capital might be a different games than what they're showing in the districts, because they might want to create a different narrative for those people. Him creating that bomb at the last minute, no record of it. It just shows Silka dying, and then it's done. So like all that extra stuff that Haymitch did to try to stick it to the capital, nobody saw it. And then this is creepy because they pull up, aerial shot away from the cornucopia, and he says, it looks like a giant eye. The cornucopia marks the pupil. The wide circle of spring green meadow makes up the iris. On either side, the darker green of the forest and mountain terrain narrows to points, forming the whites of the eye. Well, the symbolism has been lost on no one. Even the little kids in the seam know the capital powers are watching us. Giving very much 1984. It's so weird. So like when we see Katniss and Peeta in the Capitol, or like at the Victory Tour and doing all these dinners and stuff, they're very much guests of honor. Whereas Haymitch, it's still like tributes have not yet gotten to that point. He says he's displayed in a giant golden bird cage, and people come up and like feed him things through the bars like he's an animal for their own entertainment. And Snow made like this note. He's like, enjoy your homecoming. And he's like, oh my gosh, like what is Snow trying to do to my family? And so he plays it up. He like plays the role of being a pet when he's on his way home. First of all, terrifying. Like, just truly so horrible. He can hear them loading the coffins of his friends in the train with him. And that is so eerie. I really love this line. He's thinking about the Hanging Tree song, and he says, strange things indeed, a dead man calling out his ghost. No, Lenore Dove said it was a bird. Birds. Jabberjays. The failed mutts let loose to die in District 12, but they defied the capital's sentence of extinction by fathering a new species, mockingjays, before they vanished. Is that what makes the song dangerous? Immortalizing those wayward mutts in a song. And I really kind of liked, I don't know if this is like a real parallel or if I'm just reading into it, but the idea earlier, Haymitch said that he had failed and he's being returned to District 12. So this line, the failed mutts let loose to die in District 12. So they're sending him back, knowing that they're going to take everything from him by taking Lenore Dove and his family. And then, but they defied the capital's sentence of extinction by fathering a new species, mockingjays. And so now Haymitch is going to take on this mentor and to an extent parental figure for the mockingjay. And I was like, is this like a parallel here that we have of Haymitch? Because maybe he didn't do what the capital wanted him to do the way the Jabberjays did, but what their real act of rebellion is raising up the mockingjays, like creating this new species, and that's what Haymitch is about to do. I just thought that was really interesting as a parallel, if that's like a thing that was intentional. He's having like these nightmares, and he's with Lulu and Luella, and they're asking which of us is which. And he says, but the capital is one. I can't tell them apart, which is creepy. And I think if we're taking Lulu as like an invention of the capital to like try and distort reality, take control of a story, then it's like, if he can't even tell the difference, who can? Like, how? At what point is it so hard to tell the difference between what the capital wants people to think and what you're actually thinking? And can you tell the difference? He gets off the train, and like he doesn't even get to see his mom and brother. Like all he sees is the house burning, and I felt horrible. And Burdock is with Astrid, and he's like, please help him. And she gives Haymitch that like the sleeping potion thing to try and knock him out. This is horrible, because one of the reasons they couldn't put the fire out of the house is because the pump is slow and the cistern is dry, and Haymitch realizes, I'm the reason that cistern's dry. Running off the morning of reaping day, leaving my chores to Sid. My fault. How is he supposed to know? Like, Snow, if it didn't work, Snow would have engineered another way. Like, it wasn't his fault, but I understand why he thinks it is. But that was just like, it was so heartbreaking to see that as like his immediate thought process. Very Katnissy in that way. And then Burdock shows up and sings the Sweet Old Hereafter. That is Lucy Gray's song for the funeral. They do the 3-finger salute. It is all deeply upsetting. He decides Lenore Dove is like all he has left, basically. And he was going to leave District 12 himself, but then he's like, if she wants to come with me, I'm not going to stop her. And so he goes to see her, and it's so cute. He's like seeing her from afar, and she ends up finding gumdrops, and she's like so excited about them, and she doesn't know that he's watching, and then he makes himself known. And she goes, you came back to me in this world. And he says, and you managed not to get hung. And then she's like, I have these gumdrops. And then he feeds her one, and she's like, I guess I can eat the other ones. And he's like, what other ones? And she's like, the ones that Sid gave me that are under my pillow. And then that's when Haymitch realizes that the gumdrops are not the ones that he gave her, and tells her to spit it out, but it's too late. The poison's taken effect and she dies. It's really upsetting. because Snow orchestrated that, and Haymitch gave her the gumdrop himself. That, I think, breaks the last strand of sanity that Haymitch has for a very long amount of time. She basically makes him promise. She says, don't let the sun rise on the reaping, basically figure out how to stop the Hunger Games. And it's really sad because he feels like she's sentenced him to life, because he doesn't really want to be there anymore. And his friends try really hard, but it's at the point that like Haymitch starts throwing rocks when Burdock and Astrid try and come help him. One hits Astrid and I'm like, ooh, not good. He kind of is going in and out of, I feel like almost a hallucination state. He knows that she got buried in the woods and he tries and heads out there, and Burdock hasn't forgiven Haymitch for hitting Astrid like that, but he does show Haymitch where basically the family plot for the Covey is. That's where we see the stones for Maud Clare, which is Maud Ivory, and then Lucy Gray, which we don't know if she's actually dead or not unless this is our answer. Do you think this is our answer? Because if they found her body and they buried her there, then, that's the end of the mystery for us, or they just put a stone there because they never found her. And I don't know what I think. I kind of think it's meant to be a mystery the way that the poem is, but at the same time, do you think the Covey would have created a grave for her without knowing she was dead? So, interested to hear your thoughts on that. And then there's one for Lenor. So really, it's all incredibly, horribly sad. That's when he finds a spray-painted message in orange, which is important. No capital, no hanging tree. No capital, no reaping. And so it's like a play on the propaganda they had earlier, and he realizes that is what Lenor did, and that's what Maysilee knew about her. We kind of see him turning into the person we see at the beginning of the Hunger Games. He's having these like nightmares, and he says, Panache seems to have little to do but hunt me down, and Silka thinks I owe her a crown. The terror bleeds into my waking hours. I start sleeping with a knife in my hand. And that's like very much a hallmark trait of what we see of Haymitch. Effie comes to check on him for the victory tour and get him ready. Apparently, the story is that Lenore Dove had appendicitis and died from it. Also, we see that top part in the Justice Building when they're on the victory tour. Plutarch's the one who shows him where it is. He takes him up to this, the dust-covered attic, and he is trying to help Haymitch. Haymitch is off his rocker. He's saying respite and nepenthe. Is that how you say it? Because he's drinking, and that's from, the line from Lenore Dove's poem. Plutarch says this is the only place that isn't bugged. And he's talking about BT for a little bit. Haymitch says, I'm guessing BT's dead. And Plutarch says BT's too valuable to kill. And then Haymitch said, I thought he'd have killed himself. And then Plutarch says that he can't, his wife's pregnant, besides he wouldn't let Ampert down that way. And I'm like, this is kind of super sad because after seeing what happened to Ampert, why does he want to risk another child, sort of? Because by the time we meet him, as far as I know, we don't really talk about BT having a family by the time we get to Katniss. Plutarch is like, we need you, Haymitch, and Haymitch is like, absolutely not. I'm living proof the Capitol always wins. But Plutarch says no. He's like, you shook up the Capitol both figuratively and literally with that earthquake. And it really reminds me of that line from, is it Mockingjay? Catching Fire? When they're like, Katniss, you set the spark. And then Haymitch is like trying to push back on it. And Plutarch says, no, Haymitch, we need someone exactly like you. And then Haymitch says, just luckier, or with better timing. Having an army at their back wouldn't hurt. And so that's like some foreshadowing for Katniss, because we say it so many times that Katniss is exactly like Haymitch. Haymitch kind of gets onto Plutarch being like, do you really think you're a good person? And Plutarch's like, I'm not a hero, but at least I'm still in the game. And I think that kind of is able to spur Haymitch on a little bit. And then at the end, he kind of makes a note that every year for his birthday, he will get a new pair of tributes to Mentor. And that is, it's so heartbreaking. And then we get to the epilogue, and he's talking about Lenore Dove. And he's like, I can't go to her yet. I have to look after my family. And he's like, I first saw the girl at the Hob when she was just a baby. Burdock was so proud of her. I'm like, I'm fine. It's Katniss. He's talking about her growing up and then seeing her come alone to the Hob because her father had died. And I was like, after everything Haymitch went through, he now has to see his friend die a tragic and young death and then watch Burdock's daughter go into the Hunger Games. Like, it's so upsetting when you know more of the backstory. And he says, reminding me for all the world of my Luella McCoy, my sweetheart of old. And after she volunteered for the games, that nickname couldn't help but slip out. I didn't want to let them in, her and PETA. And then he also says, I didn't want to have anything to do with their memorial book after the war. What use, what point to relive all the loss? That's the book that we're talking about at the end of Mockingjay that Katniss is putting together with PETA. And he's talking about after everything. Like this little epilogue situation spans well after Mockingjay. And he's talking about how Katniss has given him geese to raise, which is like, That's what Lenore Dove did, and it's so upsetting the way it all connects together. And then Haymitch says she's not an easy person. She's like me, PETA always says, but she was smarter than me, or luckier. She's the one who finally kept that sun from rising on the reaping. Hence the title. I will be reading the final paragraphs. I know one thing, though. The Capitol can never take Lenore Dove from me again. They never really did in the first place. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping, which is from the song. And she is the most precious thing I've ever known. When I tell her that, she always says, I love you like all fire. And I reply, I love you like all fire to the end. And so I'm like, is he having hallucinations here at the end? Or like, what is going on? Or is it just like, you know, the mental version of Lenore Dove that he has in his mind? And I was just like, I just feel like I don't know what to do now. It's fine. Everything's fine. I feel like this was a masterpiece, truly. Like, such a good book. So many things wrapped up together from the other 4 books, and I loved it a lot. I think I do need some time to marinate in the sadness. Would love to know your thoughts. What parts did I not talk about that you felt were super important? What was your favorite part? Do you think that grave for Lucy Gray was actually her grave and they found her, or it was just like a memorial situation? Do you think Suzanne Collins will write us another book? We can wallow in grief together in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Caitlin. Thanks for watching. Bye.